What is up? My name is Matt Workwood for Cinematography Database, and in this video, we're going to be breaking down the cinematography of Wonder Woman, directed by Patty Jenkins and shot by Matthew. Just kidding, Matthew Jensen is the DP of this film, and I saw it on opening day in Somerville, Massachusetts, and it was a pretty crowded theater, which I was kind of impressed with. And there's still a lot of interesting looks in this, and a lot of cool behind the scenes that I'm interested to break down for this week, and I hope you guys are ready for that. And before we get right into it, I wanted to mention that I am producing a course, an online course called Commercial Cinematography 1, meaning there's probably going to be more. White Cyc Lighting, you can learn more about that down below, and if you go to the link, you can sign up to join the mailing list to learn more about that. But let's get right into this breakdown. Now, the way that I've organized this breakdown is basically chronological order, but then put together by the different looks, and hopefully that makes sense. I did get all of this footage from the trailers that were available from the internet, and the B-roll also available as marketing for this movie. So if you haven't seen the movie, there will definitely be some spoilers in this breakdown, so maybe give this a pause, go watch the movie in theaters, come back and watch it right then. Just had to say that before we got super started. So here we are in Wonder Woman's home island, and I guess the planet is Earth. It's called Themyscira. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that again. I'm just going to keep saying her homeland. That's what we're at. And it's kind of like the beginning of the Pirates of the Caribbean with this kind of idyllic, very blue ocean over here. And you'll see that even more in other shots in the blue sky. And I think as far as architecture, this is supposed to be influenced by ancient Greece, though it's obviously its own special kind of like almost alien world / Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings thing going on, but there is a lot of ancient Greek mythology, so I'm assuming the architecture was somewhat based on that overall. Moving on, we see little Wonder Woman down here, Diana, which is funny because that's my wife's name, so it's always going to be funny for me to say that for this movie. We see the ultra saturated cyan here in the water, very saturated greens on the Pirates of the Caribbean, and yeah, we definitely see a little bit of the ancient Greek as far as the influence as far as the clothing, these statues, and just this kind of overall stone architectural look for this whole island. Nothing's made out of metal or anything like that. Here's another shot of the island, and they are riding horses, which feels, again, very ancient Greek or Roman. I'm not going to pretend like I really understand or remember the differences. At this point in time, it's been quite a bit since history in college and high school, but I feel like we have a little bit of a period helmet going on there, and again, this architecture and this art style definitely a little bit old school. Okay, so we're still at the beginning of the film where we're learning about the island, we're learning about who she is and what's going on. We definitely see the ancient Greek or Roman going on here with the sphere and the hat and the mohawk going on here. And we flip around and we see this sword here, and this is what we think is the god killer is what she's talking about. We find out that there's an evil god, Ares, and then she has to go and kill him somehow using this sword, or someone has to do it. That's what we get so far. It's this kind of cool gold architecture and this real shiny sword in the middle of the room. A little bit like Excalibur, except Wonder Woman Excalibur. Here's a shot of young Diana looking at the sword. And this is one of the only times in the movie where the lighting will look like this, meaning pure white. Like there's no real color correction going on here. We have very black shadows here and very white highlights, just very normal skin tones. And I guess this is kind of like a flashback. I don't remember narratively if it's a flashback in the movie, but you don't see many scenes moving forward after this where the colors stay like this. So I thought that was kind of unique in retrospect here. We see her mother here having a conversation with her, and we're seeing just a little tiny bit of blue in the shadows here, but still overall we have very soft side lighting happen here, very beauty lighting going on here, and all very pure and white light. So say goodbye to that in a few minutes. Here's a close-up of the sword. And I thought this was a pretty cool scene. This is back in the bedroom, and she sleeps on this kind of odd bed. This actually reminded me of Guardians of the Galaxy, because remember that scene in Guardians of the Galaxy? If you haven't seen my breakdown, maybe go watch it. There's a whole scene where the douchebag people is what I call them. They have this whole gold lame over them, which is a gold shiny fabric, and they're bouncing light into it. It's making everything kind of warm and gold, and the people are actually made out of gold too. All to say that this gold rim here kind of reminded me of that. So like maybe this thing is made out of brass or gold or something like that, and it's kind of like edge-lit around here. It kind of has like a supernatural look to it, considering that the only real light sources that would probably be in a place like this would be candles. So this has a little bit of a kind of an alien supernatural look to it. And I think there's probably something to be said about this, something sleeping in a circle like this, little bit of a sun pattern here, kind of maybe hinting at the godliness of this. And there's also pretty cool patterns in the background. Maybe we're reading way too much into it, but that's what we're doing in this breakdown. Here we are in a very warm scene here, and I don't know if it's the lighting or if it's just the like reflecting off the gold, but I think overall there was some warmth added to this. And what I'm guessing for this film, after comparing the BTS to the actual finished version of it, even though this is from the trailer, not the film, is that they shot most of it white and did all the coloring in post. I didn't interview the DP or the colorist, which I believe was at Company 3 for this one, but you'll kind of see why I think that. Anyway, very warm scene, setting it up, very nice childhood and whatnot. A very caring mother, very warm and happy scene here. So we've set it up. She lives on Thymoscara. I'm going to get the name wrong. When it's outside, it's this beautiful blue environment with white stone and very, very regal. And inside, it's a very warm, cuddly environment with the family. And here's another shot from the trailer. I remember remembering this from the trailer. It reminds me of like the Sound of Music. Let me know in the comments if you guys even know what that is. And she's riding a white horse through this very green and yellow field. Just this very beautiful, idyllic, romantic childhood being set up here. But there is a little bit of trouble. We do find out that her sister, who is the kind of the general of this whole operation, she really thinks that Diana needs to learn how to fight. And so this is like one of those kind of cool, like Kill Bill, like Karate Kid moments where she's teaching her how to fight. So I thought that this was a cool shot. Definitely feels like overall that this was, maybe this platform is real and then there was green screen and then all of this stuff is a little bit of a matte painting, a little bit of a CG helicopter plate maybe. Moving on, Diana has grown up quite a bit here and she's learned how to fight. And we're kind of at this trial where she's going to go up against her teacher who taught her to fight. And the queen or her mother, whoever, I forget who the character is, basically told her that you need to train her to fight better than you can. And so this is that moment with grown-up Diana. And we have all these other people here that are going to try to hurt her and whatnot. And they get at it. They start fighting. And what's kind of interesting about this scene, and we'll look at it in the BTS, is that is something that's always interesting in movies like this is to try to figure out where the real set is and then where the digital extension is. And when you're watching the movie, it's all handheld and a little bit of crane work, so you can never really tell. There's so much motion blur. They do an amazing job compositing, but you can kind of imagine that this bit is all real, maybe to here, maybe this stuff, and then like all of this kind of like Avatar looking stuff in the background is compositing. And we'll kind of look at some of that here. It's also interesting to keep track of how the backlight is working because they're basically backlighting all of these scenes. That's just the nice way of doing daylight exteriors. And if you watch this a little bit too closely, the sun's just jumping back and forth in directions, and the time of day is actually changing quite a bit, where you see the shadows get very blue and then it's a very orange side light, and that's all forgivable because they actually shot this part on location. This stuff wasn't on stage. And in one of the interviews, I need to move faster because this is going to be a long breakdown, but one of the interviews he talked about them shooting in, I think, was it different parts of England in the winter, and the places they were shooting were very challenging with short daylight, so it's forgivable. But if you watch the scene, you can kind of pick some of that out here. So we see if this is given, again, like the same time of day, I suppose. I mean, this is a very high shadow, and I don't know if this breakdown, if I'm really going to get picky about this. I just kind of all I have to talk about for this sequence right now. The shadow's coming from like almost straight down, and then within the same scene, we're now coming directly from the side. So it's kind of gone from like 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. in the summer, but it's very cool, and we're starting to set up and see a little bit more the blue in the shadows, and we're kind of becoming we're kind of moving into our superhero color correct. And we've all probably seen the breakdowns where it's like, oh, Michael Bay does like the orange and blue, the orange and cyan color correct for the superhero movies and Transformers, and it was in the Pirates of the Caribbean. But what I would say for this movie is that at least the look kind of evolves, and we'll talk about that here. Again, in the beginning, when we're in like kind of normal life, the color correct is way more neutral, just white is white, black is black. But we see as her powers start to emerge, we start to see a lot more of these cyan and orange. And by the end, we see a whole new look completely, which we will look at. But this is the first part where we're kind of seeing a little tiny bit of the cyan color correct. And we have a little bit of the warm light coming from the side here. Pretty cool lighting. Kind of a big time change. But again, we're on like kind of a special planet. She starts getting attacked and she crosses her arms and she does her whole Wonder Woman explosion thing. And I don't know much about Wonder Woman. Definitely did not read the comics. Haven't seen Batman vs Superman. I do kind of want to see Justice League. It looks pretty badass, but she makes this big explosion. And again, this orange, we'll see this very fiery orange color becomes very symbolic and something that we see more and more as her character and her powers evolve. She makes this whole like sonic boom happen, pretty awesome Hadouken Naruto style explosion. I just love scenes like this. I'm a huge Naruto fan, so anytime there's like these big fights and like islands are exploding and stuff like that, just reminds me of Naruto. So I'm always a fan of it. So moving on to some BTS, this actually was shot on good old 35mm film, which I think is really impressive. And apparently parts of it were shot with the Alexa 65 as well. I don't know what, maybe the wide shots, the helicopter shots, maybe some of this island stuff. Didn't really figure that out. But it's shot on 35mm film with spherical Panavision Primo lenses, which if you're going to shoot a movie and you had to pick a set of lenses just kind of blind, my advice would be to shoot with Panavision Primo spherical lenses. You're not going to go wrong. They're lovely. And we see the Panavision here. This is like a GL2 or XL2. I forget the Panavision models. It's been a long time. And we see it on, I believe this is a Chapman CL head or Chapman Leonard head, little remote head situation going on. Pretty cool here. We see Diana in her outfit. And yeah, moving on. So here's a wide shot. So this scene they shot pretty practically. We can tell that compared to, let me bring it back up, compared to this shot, there are not mountains everywhere. And you can semi-sense this. I hate to get picky like this, but you could semi-sense that this is being cut out here if you look really closely. In the movie, you can't tell, but that's because where they were actually shooting it looked like this. There were no actual mountains in the background. So that's something to consider. We see the production vehicles up here. We see an XL3, which I haven't seen for a hot minute. The Sony XL3 doing BTS or VFX reference. And this scene was lit pretty naturally. I don't believe there's a lot of 18Ks from what I've been seeing in the BTS. Just one big ultra bounce going on. And we have our Steadicam operator and an octagon low bounce. Pretty cool. I feel like there must have been some HMIs for some of the harder light, but maybe they were just waiting for the right time of day. Who knows? Moving on here, this is a little bit closer. Again, we see our Steadicam. This is the XL2, I believe, with the Steadicam mag in the background. Cinetape right there. Cinetape reference being used for our focus puller here. Again, I don't believe the gentleman's looking at a monitor. Old school, shooting on film. That monitor's not going to help very much anyway because the film tip's pretty bad. You got to pull focus by the old eye. I know that Pirates was like that, and it's making a comeback or something like that. So we're going to need more focus pullers to know how to do it this way. And we see our octagon bounce here, kind of a beauty bounce. It looks like they're using the soft side, and this is going to add a little bit of fill to the shadowy side. It looks like overall the sun is coming from this direction, kind of diffused. Not too much hard light, and this is just going to fill in a little bit here, and the octagon shape makes it a round reflection in her eye. I think that's the reason you go with one of those versus a square one. Another close-up of the Steadicam. Always fun to see some Steadicam stuff. Another close-up of the Steadicam, and we have the monitor flipped up this way because he's in low mode. And this is sometimes a scrim, sometimes it's just a 6x solid, and this is to stop the wind from actually catching the camera and throwing off the horizon. And we see another bounce here, though this seems like more like a sun bounce and less of an octagon bounce. I don't know why they would change that, but whatever. And this is some real paparazzi looking stills. I apologize for the low quality of this, but I did my best to research what was going on. We have these big green walls that are going to be used, or frames here. They're going to be used to put the characters, they're going to be used to put behind the characters, like in that shot we saw of Diana, so that they could cut her out easier and put the avatar background in there. And this is how they're lighting most of this scene. So we have the light basically coming as a backlight from this direction and bouncing into this, and then this thing becomes basically a gigantic light source. Is this a 20 by? It's a pretty big light source. It's going to be really soft, and it's going to push a lot of light back in their direction. It looks like, from what I saw in the BTS, that's primarily how they lit this whole exterior. Just the sunlight and a big old bounce. Another close-up, and we see what almost looks like a gimbal. Is this a gimbal? I can't tell what this is. Kind of weird grips. It looks like this might be a gimbal of some sort. I don't really know. And then we see someone on probably some sort of like low hi-hat or something like that. So that's this whole confrontation scene. I guess I won't spoil it if you haven't seen it yet, but it's one of the cool scenes where her powers first come out. I guess you kind of already saw that already. Moving on to the beach scene. Again, a very, very beautiful beach, very saturated greens, a little bit of yellow dandelions, and very, very Pirates of the Caribbean looking cyan water. Again, all virtual, assuming that this is all cut out. You can kind of tell by the softness right here, but they did match the lighting pretty well because the sun, based on this lighting, is coming from about here, and I feel like they kind of hinted at that being up here, and it's coming from the side, and more or less these mountains are kind of being lit in the same way. I feel like the lighting is a little bit more sidey than it is backlighty, given this. So actually, I give this composite overall actually kind of a B-, because on her, it's pretty backlighty, but on these mountains here, it's pretty side lighty. And there's no real indication of the sun. And we kind of have this reflection here. I don't know why I'm talking about the compositing so much, but this kind of infers that the sun's up here and you're reflecting it. But I give this composite a B minus. A B minus, guys. Sorry. Moving on. I'm kind of just playing here. Hope you guys are cool with that. If you actually on the VFX team and watching this, I'm just poking fun. But I like to look at the lighting and composites. It's something I thought a lot about when I was DPing commercials with blue screen and green screen. We have an underwater shot, kind of reminiscent of the Johnny Depp version, except in this case, it's basically black and white with an extremely blue color correct in the shadows. It's a cool look. I don't know if I've ever shot anything like this, but if I do, I know what to color correct it like to have it look like this. Now, this is exactly the same as the intro shot that I did for Pirates of the Caribbean. Very cool, very interesting. I've never been to a place that has white rock like this. I don't know if the rock is color corrected. The beach is white. This is very green, and this is blue, and this is uber cyan. And we're in our idyllic, kind of romantic island here, paradise, if you would call it. Yeah, this is definitely like this is the paradise look. I would give it that. But we have our pilot who crashed into the sea, and she went and rescued him. And then basically from here on out, the fighting starts, the violence starts, and the color corrects, and the look shifts quite a bit. Here we are, looking up at Diana. We can definitely see that this is more than just the light being bounced back at her, is a reflection of a gigantic bounce over there. This light, kind of assuming that's just the sun, right? And we have this almost kind of exact same scene and shot in Pirates of the Caribbean, so I guess it's a good one to know how to light, and we're going to look at how they did that right now. So that big reflection that we talked about here, that is essentially this. And I feel like I'm just doing the Pirates of the Caribbean breakdown again, so maybe I'll just do this quickly. But maybe not everyone saw that. Big bounce here, ultra bounce, maybe bleached muslin, and that's going to bounce the sun, make that whole diffusion frame a light source, and you're going to get lighting that looks like this if you put it right up on her, which you would need to get the exposure. We see our Panavision XL2 in the background. It looks like there's a mag, so this is probably not the Alexa 65 part. I can't really tell. And this is most likely, I don't remember the exact model, but this looks again like a Chapman-Leonard remote head and a Chapman-Leonard telescopic crane or hydroscope, most likely in this case. This is another cool BTS, which wraps up this beach part 1 sequence. And we see our director here, Patty, and Diana hanging out. This looks like the focus puller. Pretty cool. With a mag, maybe. A little bit of diffusion down here. Some sort of low bounce. We see definitely a Panavision camera on a Chapman slider. Some Mitchell legs here. And is this a hydroscope? I don't really know the hydroscopes all that super well. Maybe if I go back, I'll learn a little bit more. But I'm guessing this is something like a hydroscope 73, maybe like that. Is it that big? I can't tell. And again, the Chapman remote head with a Cinetape. Really cool still. I like this BTS, and this is going to take us to the beach part 2. Okay, so this is the beach part 2, and we see all of the Amazons rushing the World War I Germany soldiers. I think that's what the reference is here, and they landed on their boats, and they're charging the shore, and they're shooting them, and all these people have are spears and swords, so they get kind of torn up. And if we see from this angle, I thought I had the BTS of it, but I didn't find it. I'm assuming this was actually shot practically on the beach, and they were using a spider cam, and they were just flying it back and forth across the beach. I had a picture of it, but I lost it, so I don't have proof of that. This is the reverse of that shot, and something to keep in mind is that these are probably real here. These are probably real too. I don't know if they're from the same shot, but then if you look at this kind of mushiness here, we'll kind of see what this is in real life. And these, I feel like they're maybe composited. And this is another one of those cable cam shots. Water's probably, this seems like this is consistent, but we'll look at the BTS and see what was real, what wasn't. Here is a kind of randomly long wide shot here. So we see our big hydroscope here. Looks like it was a 73 or a 50, something pretty big. And now that I'm looking at this, I feel like I take it back. All of this rock stuff is completely fake because, yeah, it looks like kind of like Fiji and crazy. And here, water's less cyan, and it could be the photography. Rocks are not white. Way more of a normal looking beach, so all that stuff was added in post. Though I feel like this might have been a different location. But anyway, it was a cool wide shot, and I have a fun time trying to figure out what's what. I don't know if all these people are actually working this or if this is kind of touristy going on, people just watching, but we definitely have some regular production tens, a telehandler for one of these big green screens, And we'll look at some more BTS as we go on here. So this shot is pretty cool. This is definitely done on, well, I don't know, definitely. This seems like it's done on a much longer lens, something like a 200 mil. And the sun is now coming from this direction. I'm not going to track the sun because if you track action sequences, because they shot these over many days, the sun's going to be all over the place. But anyway, sun's coming from here. So the composite does make sense. And these rocks, as we've discovered, are completely added in post. And that becomes more clear as you look at this shot. So the actual beach, way less cool. It doesn't look as much like Fiji and as paradisey. So they just dropped these gigantic green screens. They look like, I would guess that these are 20 by 20s each, and they're being each held up probably with truss frames behind them and being held up by telehandlers. And this might also be just a tie-off point for safety with a couple tracking marks, which I don't know why you would really need these at the, I don't know, but whatever. So they did actually composite most of the island in the background, though it's pretty seamless. Even looking at the still, I thought that some of it was actually real. In this case, they've actually gotten the sun to come over the top of the green screens and backlight them really well, which is kind of like the perfect situation, I would think, for lighting and for compositing later. So we're looking at this shot. I would kind of assume that she's composited in. Maybe it's just different motion blur. This whole thing might be a composite, especially this guy in the foreground. But there is probably one shot, maybe of this person here, that was actually practical and shot with one of the moving vehicles that we'll look at in a second. This whole island, I take it back, completely composited in. But anyway, they're fighting on the beach, and it's still not quite like the superhero color correct, but it does start to come in just a bit here. And this is it. Here's where we really start to see the superhero color correct come in. This feels like a composite now too, which it definitely is, because again, these rock faces are all added in post. This might not even be the same take, the way that this is looking here. This is the bullet moving in bullet time, and she's about to get hit in the stomach with it. And we're starting to see, as I think some of her superhero powers are starting to get a little bit brought out, her skin a little bit warm, and the shadows super cyan. So as she starts to activate her superhero powers, the colorist also activated the superhero color correct. Is kind of what I'm getting at for the rest of this movie, and you're going to hear me say that a lot. Here is, I forget her name, but she's the warrior sister. And this is probably 100% just shot on green screen, which is cool. Whatever. Moving on here, here's the practical part. So definitely, not that you would see it at this angle. There's not like those, all these islands in the background. Those all get composited later. That was all very nicely done. This line here makes me feel like there was the cable cam. Like I said, there was a cable cam, which is basically a little trolley with wheels on it with a camera hanging down, and the camera shoots this way. So that's how they're doing those big wide shots. But what we're going to look at right now is this kind of beach vehicle, which is for like fast moving beach shots, made by Chapman. So this is Chapman UK. Got to go pay them a visit. Would be fun to do that for a YouTube video or two. And we see these kind of triangular shaped treads. And I think they use something similar like this in Mad Max. Not that that breakdown's on this channel anymore. So Chapman does make really specialty vehicles for moving quickly on the beach here. We see more of this vehicle. You can't really see it, but it has like triangular track wheels. We see that it has some block batteries here. And as we move to our last part, I'm just keeping the same overlay from before. We see our Libra head and what I'm assuming is like an Arri 235 or something smaller 35mm camera in there for the, what I would also guess is high speed 35mm film shooting here. So just some cool stuff on the beach. Hope that was enjoyable. We're moving on to the next part. So this is one of my favorite scenes, and it does kind of remind me of the Guardians of the Galaxy douchebag scene with the throne and the presentation and whatnot, but I really liked how it looked, and I like even more how they shot it, which we're going to look at in a second. To set this up, they've just captured Steve, the pilot, and we have sunset just peeking its way through this little crack here. I think that's a pretty cool design. We have these spirals here made out of gold, so she's being very backlit right now, and it's basically sunset magic hour. And instead of it being a blue ambient sky, the entire sky is super orange, which is kind of interesting here. And it's surrounded by these watery pools with these rock faces, with a little waterfall in the background and some very green moss and kind of some brass chairs here. I like how this whole thing is set up. I like how it's kind of like earthy with some stairs built into it with these structures and these are kind of like the thrones. I just like this throne room overall. It looks really cool. And what's even more fun is that they had this BTS. So some of this is real, some of this is not real. So let's go back and forth here. I haven't really studied this all too much. Okay, so interesting, really interesting. I'm just kind of annoy you a little bit as I go back and forth here. Okay, so this structure here, this makes an appearance in the movie, and then so does this, and they bridge it in post. They're shooting it with green in the background, which green is an unpleasant color to shoot with. They actually have some light coming through here, but they make it a little bit bigger in post, which is interesting. But they do have the sunlight coming through here, so presumably this hot spot here and the actual light here is actually backlighting the talent and frontlighting him a little bit. And interesting enough, they added all the chairs in post too. So this is a cool set. I've never shot a partial set, was what this is called. I've never shot a partial set this big before, but I thought that more of this was going to be real. And actually, if you look at the chair orientation, oh no, it's right. It's kind of right. We see like this back semicircle of chairs, which is going to make sense. We'll see that in the foreground here. But a good amount of this is real. And overhead, we're seeing a lot of big diffusion frames here, or silks, shout out rag place most likely. Didn't read what was in here, but would assume some sort of blue LED, like a cream source, something like that. Just a very blue ambient overall, which is interesting because in the color correct and whatnot, the ambient is all white. No, actually, I take it back. If you look at the shadows are a little bit cool down here, despite the light up here being pretty much white and the sky being orange and not blue. So again, with the composite, I give this a B. It looks really nice, but it doesn't make perfect sense, which is fine. That's not the point of making a composite. It's supposed to look good. That's not the point, but I try to get scientific with it. We definitely have a blue ambient overall, which you see in the final composite. And we have a little bit, looks like through like a 4x8 or something like that, a harder source coming from the side. And that's what's casting this shadow right there. So a little bit of a blue ambient, a very, very warm, like 1900 Kelvin backlight going on. Green screens around the whole thing. I love this BTS photo a lot. Moving on to a closer shot here, we have the sun coming right through the throne structure here. Big old backlight, little backlight for you. And this very, very awesome lasso of truth, which when she starts fighting with it, it's pretty badass. When they're just squeezing his hand with it, it's kind of underwhelming that he can just like touch it and it doesn't like catch him on fire. I don't know. It seemed kind of an underwhelming use of a glowing lasso, but we will see in BTS how they actually got the lighting from it. It's pretty cool. So again, more warm lighting here. Top ambient is blue, as we saw from before. And in this scene, the ambient is definitely blue. It just didn't match the sky composite before. Really cool scene, and being side lit, very warm, very soft here by the sky, the opening in the sky. I like how this scene looks a lot, despite me kind of picking on the composite. We see a very warm side light here, very, very soft. Bit of an edge light too to catch her nose from here, so coming from that direction. And, you know, we kind of sense that this isn't actually the sky because we see a break. I guess it could be the tower kind of breaking it, but like sky reflections are usually much wider in the eyes. This actually does look like a piece of diffusion, but that's cool. We see on the back here a little bit of an edge light and definitely some blue in the shadows here. Very fun and very, very nice. It's always fun to be able to just half light someone like this. It is wrapping around the front a little bit, but it is a very cinematic look to just hit someone right from the side with a very large source. Always looks really great. Another close-up, we're going to look at a BTS after this. This is kind of the medium. We've already looked at it. I just really like this backlight coming through here. Side light coming from here. Blue ambient from the top in her hair and on her shoulders in the shadow side. This is an actual BTS shot, and it doesn't look like there's that much blue on set. So they must have added quite a bit of that in color correction, though we definitely saw from before that there was some blue being added, but it looks like the majority of it was added in post there. I think this is a dolly shot, and we see our focus puller here with a pretty cool strap. And they're both wearing headsets so they can hear the DP or the director, who's ever calling out the directions. Moving on. Here's a cool shot. Looks like they're using the old 65mm Panavision Primo over here for a close-up of her. I think that could have been maybe this shot. That seems a little bit tighter than a 65, but it could have been that shot. And as we're seeing this reflection in her eye, very likely that it was this 4x4 diffusion of like 250 or something like that. This doesn't look like light grid. Actually, it does look like 250. I take it back. The focus puller in this shot has a monitor. So he was cheating and a Cinetape. So I may have taken back that comment from before. Again, I just love the lighting in this scene. Very soft, warm. Side lighting happening for this shot here. We see the diffusion frame softening up the source. I don't know if it's getting both of them, if it's diffusing her and her. It looks like it might be. But anyway, very soft light happening and some very warm edge light. And we see the green screen over here. So nothing on that side of the set was practical or real, was all composited later. Moving on, I think I have a BTS of this later. I'm pretty sure I do. We see the old lasso and the rope of truth. He's getting the edge light as well, and we can definitely see a large amount of blue ambient coming into his skin here with the rest of the Amazons in the background. And we can tell that this is actually emitting light here. I don't think they would add that in CG, and we're going to look at a BTS of that in just a moment. Another close-up, moving on, getting right to the BTS. So many things about this shot that I really like. This looks like it was an LED rope of some sort, and it basically looks like this in the film. So considering that this is the BTS, they really got this lasso looking pretty awesome in real life. And I guess you can see the cord there, so that gives it all, that kind of gives it away. The other thing I like about this scene is that we see the Panavision mag here, and I have this modeled in 3D, and it's in Steadicam mode, so it's in the back, and he's grabbing it. And that's the way that I came up watching professional DPs operate fluid heads, is you grab the mag. So if it's a 435 mag or it's an XL2 mag like this, you grab the mag and you operate from it because it's really on there. And I got to do that a couple times in my career, and I wish I still could. And actually someone made batteries that are that shape, but I never like operating from the battery. I just feel like I'm just going to pull it off. It's really cool to see cameras like this out in the field again. I mean, I know that they're out there, but it's typically for the big movies. But if I ever did hop back into DPing and operating, I would love to operate that way as well. We'll kind of wrap it up on this wide shot here. So this is all green screen, I think, because if you remember, all these chairs are real here. This is real, and maybe this rock is real. They added the moss to it, but then this is all compositing. And, the opening here is what's going to motivate the light that's coming from here. Based on, let's say like this shot, really they should be have electric backs as far as the lighting. If these scenes are really going to cut together and be accurate, but narratively this is going to make a lot more sense, and it's going to put more emphasis on him. So moral of the story of this scene, I loved it. They added the blue, a lot of the shadows in post, although they introduced a lot of it, and it's okay to cheat the backlight when necessary. So after Steve is captured and they decide not to kill him, we're moving into something that I'm calling full blue. And this is basically where she starts to find out a little bit more about his world, and she eventually decides to leave the island and go with him. But this is kind of like that whole setup process, and everything in this scene and for the next sequence is going to be full blue, meaning the shadows are blue and the highlights are blue. So there's really no white. So that's just why I call it full blue. Well, this is a really cool blocking here. This is what happens when you can build a set. If I could build this in 3D, this is how I would design it. We have him as the actual foreground, some medium foreground here with an arch, and then a deeper foreground back here with some hazy light coming back here that's edge lighting her. Very, very cinematic with a nice glowing practical as well. This is like the caves of something. It's a cave where they're keeping him prisoner naked. Pretty cool going here. Again, everything just very blue. Somewhat subtle. The skin tones are somewhat preserved here, but the blue cave look as she starts to learn more about his world and what time is and whatnot. Little side light going on there as well. Does that match the direction? It does. So the key direction is preserved here. This looks great out of focus. And again, I guess the blacks are fairly black, but overall this is just like the full blue treatment as far as the color correct going on. Here's where she goes back to actually steal the sword, what she thinks is the god killer at the time. Again, full blue, and a close-up of her, again, full blue. Just everything is blue. And I keep bringing this up because of this. And this is what I found interesting after watching the BTS and comparing it to this. So we'll talk about some other things before we get to the color. But here's that same scene, presumably, where she's going to steal the whip. She's going to do all that stuff. I don't know if he's tired or he's sneezing. Don't know. I have to watch it again. Two cameras, lovely cameras. Love these mags. Awesome 50mm Primo. Probably a wider Primo. We have the Chapman Pee-wee and Anton Bauer Cineblock. The Pee-wee, I guess, the Super Pee-wee is so small that you could put the wheels on it sideways like this on the track. Got some, those like Besto blocks. I forget what those are called. One of the big-ass 120 O'Connor heads. And the whole point that I kept calling this other scene super blue is that they clearly shot this whole thing with white light, and they added this incredibly Although that's not the same scene, it basically is this. They added all of that color in post. And I don't know why that, like, I bring that up and why that's interesting. I just feel like, I don't know. I feel like for certain scenes that you actually do light with blue, and it gives a certain look, but, you know, I guess clearly in these ones, they light it white, and then they add all of that color in post, which you have more control over it. I get it, but I don't know. I would have thought a scene that was this blue would have been done more in camera, but it doesn't seem like it was. Here's our director with a PL viewfinder. Primo zoom. Is that a primo zoom? I can't tell. And this person back here, I just noticed that you're doing something. Is he rigging? Points to whoever can figure out what that guy's doing in the background. This looks like, I don't know. I'm assuming you are a camera assistant because you have film cores. Maybe the first AC or maybe the first AC, you are responsible for this PL finder. This looks like the DP here. Oh, this is good. I have this exact same light meter pouch. I feel like a boss for having this. Is the Kaoru pouch, and this is the Sekonic, I'm guessing C700 with the sideways pouch. I have these same meters and pouches. That makes me cool. Anyway, moving on. We can see that this stuff is clearly lit with white light, but the color correction goes fully blue. I don't know why I keep bringing that up, but I thought that was interesting. Steadicam, super awesome, and here's her taking the Godkiller's sword. And here we are to wrap out this scene here. We're back in full blue. My mouse is a little bit stuck. There we go. We're in full blue again. I'm assuming this scene is entirely green screen, which is fine. Completely fine. The color correct matches. And to make nighttime here, we have our what would be moonlight up here, kind of the same as Pirates of the Caribbean. And we just pretend like we have A7Ss at, 100,000 ISO, where the moonlight you could actually get an exposure from. But basically, if you use a relatively large soft source, kind of like with Pirates of the Caribbean again, as long as it's coming from one direction, it feels like moonlight, and we buy it, and we go full blue with the whites, and pretty much blue in the blacks as well here. So this goodbye scene, very emotional. I thought they did this pretty well, considering how super fast the scene happened, to convey the emotion of what was happening. Being very brightly side-lit by the moon here. That's cool. It's a very low moon. To be lighting from the side. Full blue color correct. Again, emotional scene. This one I buy a tiny bit more because this could be kind of like the moon. Again, at like 200,000 ISO. Very soft moonlight coming from here. Full blue. And then here's our motivation for this whole scene. And we buy this now as audience members and from Pirates of the Caribbean and whatnot. The big old moon's right here, lighting up the sky, and it's reflecting in the ocean and makes everything blue. So that's the full blue color correct. And for the interior scenes, or I guess, yeah, their interior scenes before with it, we're assuming, or I'm guessing, they shot it with all white, white balanced properly, and added all the blue in color correction. That's the full blue. Kind of skipping around timeline-wise, here is Steve at the German base, and this is him kind of recounting his story, kind of flashbacky, a little bit of a bleach bypass, warm look going on for the exteriors here. Here's him bombing him at the end. And this is an interesting look. I think it's kind of like a gold bleach bypass, basically. So the blacks have a little bit of that bypass look going on, and the highlights are all tinted very, very warm. And most likely this is just green screen, and only thing that's real here is him and these people. Everything else, maybe this plane, everything else is probably composited in. And we keep with the same look where we're basically tinting all the whites, because this would normally be white, and so with these probably. We're tinting them full yellow, so it kind of has this suede film look going on to it. I like this kind of color correction overall. And we have a very warm shadow as well, and it does get pretty dark here, but maybe it's just the haze. I think it has a pretty dark shadow here with a little bit of warmth, but the highlights are definitely super warm, and I think the atmosphere is added by the actual atmosphere of the set, meaning haze or smog or some sort of actual physical atmosphere. And we see that here. And we see again that the windows for actual photography, so the raw image of this, would be white, right? So the warmth was added in color correction, which that makes perfect sense to me. And we see that the practicals, they're pretty much right on there as being warm. And in the deep background, we have a set extension, so that's green screen. So if we go back to here, maybe they added those doors in. Yeah, it looks like so they probably added the doors in and the warm exterior as well. What else to point out here? Not sure. We have our film camera on an overslung. This is called overslung when you do the head this way. CL head, Chapman Leonard head. Leonard head. We have the XL2 up there, probably with a Primo Prime, and on one of the smaller of the Chapman cranes. So maybe this is the mini scope, which we did a video for a few weeks ago. Moving on here, we see a pretty cool close-up, very much from the side, very cinematic, like we said before. Looks like there's a little bit of a low eye light for both of those. We see the same window that is kind of the same as this window. Very similar, if not the same exact window completely. And the warm light added in post. So this is their flashback look for the German Warhouse. Warhouse? Poison House? Whatever this is. Little bit of a bleach bypass in the shadows. And then everything very warm in the midtones and the highlights. And it seems like in here, there's actually a little bit of a green color correct as well. And we'll see this again. So this kind of, this warm and green look, or orange and green color correct versus orange and cyan. This is a little bit more towards green. We'll see this again as well. Here's a BTS shot from that same scene. Again, set extension here. White light coming through the windows, a little bit of smoke. Some practicals that aren't really emitting any light, and I wanted to call this out. This is a light mat here, so LED. Well, presumably, if they're shooting daylight, this is probably shooting daylight as well. We see our Steadicam operator here on a dolly, perhaps? Can't tell. I think this is the light mat 2L. It's kind of a square light mat. Very lightweight, just Carlini red on there. Very nice soft light. If you guys haven't heard of light mats, they're made by Light Gear. Go check them out. Yeah, so that's all I really wanted to point out here. We have haze, a little bit of white light coming through the windows. Pretty hard light, seems like, that they color correct warm again. And you guys know what I think about practicals. They did a lot of work to make sure that these very warm practicals were in the shot because the bulbs are below the scoop, which doesn't make any sense, really. And then they're also very low so that they made it into the frame. And that's to give you kind of this old tungsten vibe here. And I'll show the wide shot of it again here. They worked very hard to make sure that those were in the shot and you actually saw them. Here's another shot from that same scene where she's gassing somebody. Very warm, color correct overall. Like we said before, kind of makes things look kind of poisony maybe, kind of vintagey. Like if you're going to do a sepia look, this is kind of the foundations of a sepia look as well. And just wrapping out this whole scene here. Moving on, we're looking at a fully CG rendering of old London here. Pretty cool. And the whole place is just covered in like smoke and smog. I guess probably because of like the manufacturing revolution that was happening at the time. So that's how everything was getting made back then. So there's just a lot of air pollution and smog and everything is very blue. And she actually jokes about how hideous it is, which is kind of funny. And I don't know what it is about these shots. When you're watching them for real, I don't notice them at all. But it does have that kind of like Lord of the Rings composited feel here. So this is definitely just against the green screen where the big blue overhead, just like the one we saw in the kind of courtroom going on. Blue overhead lighting because we see a little bit of color contrast and then a big, slightly warmer source from the side here. I actually feel like the lighting is kind of odd and feels somewhat manipulated here. It's a cool composite. I like it. It definitely tells it. But there's something funny about the depth of field that just screams composite to me in this scene. Although I like the way that it looks and I like the color correct. This is blue London, this part of the breakdown here. So this is when London is all pretty much super blue. I would say even up here, we're a little bit of VSCO C9 going on here where the highlights are tinted, brought down to not be pure white, and then tinted definitely blue here. Whites are blue, and the blacks are even a little bit of blue as well. And this is them walking around London. This is another scene that's an interior that it has, I would say, it has a lot more like normal skin tones going on here. But we definitely have the blue color correct in the background as well. And I'm talking a lot about the color correct here, and that's what I'm kind of grasping onto for this breakdown. I don't know why. Hopefully it's not super boring to hear this over and over again. But this is how they shot it practically. So it's pure white lighting again, and they're just doing all that in color correction. There's no wide shot from this scene, but there's definitely some huge light source above, probably like just a big 20 by a muslin, and it's just shooting straight down here. And they're using negative fill and blocking to basically get some shape out of it, is what I'm guessing. And we see the reappearance of the stop sign, the octagon low bounce, and we see our Steadicam operator over here. Pretty badass. Same scene from before, big overhead lights, definitely a side light coming from this direction, and a camera on a dolly. Very lovely. And another BTS from that same scene here. Anything interesting to point out here? It's definitely two cameras shooting there. This looks like some sort of Chapman dolly given the handle of it. And we have our negative fill, which like we were talking about before is going to calm down the bounce, give a little shadow side to them. And we see a 4x8 diffusion, which is kind of unique. You don't really see those in the States all that much, but I see them more in Europe and Canada. I think 4x8 size diffusions are pretty awesome. And maybe it's just me that doesn't use them, but for keying dialogue scenes, it works really well. It's like two 4x4s next to each other, obviously, but when you have people, like 2 or 3 people in a row, a 4x8 is a really nice size light source that it has a nice soft look to it. And they're using that really well here. This is going to take us to this scene. Again, this is the Blue London C9 VSCO color correct where the highlights are blue, the blacks are blue. This is Blue London, and they're going to Dunn's Yard. Lovely Dunn's Yard. And I picked this shot particularly because this is a set extension here, which I thought was interesting. We have the lighting from the top, and this is where he gets kind of like almost killed and she saves him. Looking at the BTS from this, and I believe that's that same angle. We have a practical here. So this feels like a stage. Okay, so this is real. The floor was real. There's a solid there, and the green screen behind it. I don't know where the solid is there in this shot, but presumably that is this angle, right? So this pipe right there is the pipe that's right there. So they're a little bit further back in that actual shot there. But I always think it's interesting to look at how these are working. It looks like the deeper background here. I'm going back one more time. They basically just pulled this whole bit out and added a little bit more depth to it. And the primary light source is coming from the top here, and it looks like there's kind of this lower bounce here with a source coming of it, this kind of uplighting him because they're both wearing very brimmed hats, so they had to uplight to get any fill in there. And again, we see 2 cameras, 40mm on a Steadicam and maybe a 65 or a 50 on a dolly there. The same scene. I'm not going to go through the narrative of it. Kind of interesting. Let me add a layer. Kind of interesting that there's a little bit of light coming through there. It's kind of cool. I think considering how dim this light would be, this would have to be, I don't know, the balance seems a tiny bit off there. Like that's kind of bright for what's going on here. But cool top lighting overall for the scene in the super blue color correct. Here's where she blocks the bullet. This is looking back towards that green screen direction. So this is going to be a composite in the background here. With the top light on her hand and a little bit of that low bounce that we saw from this thing, we're seeing bounce low for her as well, or otherwise she would be completely in the dark. And here's that shot again. Oh, and I take it back, actually. As we look at this a little bit closer now, perhaps this light from the side is this Kinoflow Celeb 200 Hill doing some of this guy. And again, most likely they shot it and exposed it completely white like this, Holler EX3 in the background. Added this color correction completely in post. Moving on to what I'm calling London Warm. This is the warm part. This is where we see her first land in this department store, and she's going to go get cleaned up and get an outfit that isn't a bathing suit. And this is clearly a scene where they're trying to make her look lovely because she looks lovely. And it's also one of the scenes where we're actually seeing white light again on her from this direction. Or not from this direction, just white light in general. And this scene has a lot of practical tungsten. Is it tungsten? Yeah, I guess it's tungsten bulbs in the background. So this is kind of an interesting scene to watch play out. This sets it all up. Again, practicals tell you everything you need to know about the motivation for lighting. That's the way that I like to think about it. We have tungsten bulb and marble is definitely the theme of this. Our chandelier. So this is kind of motivating all the lighting. We have white ceilings, this is kind of like old school recessed lighting with tungsten bulbs punching into them, which is going to make a nice soft top light from above. And we're going to kind of track this as we go through it. Here's the daylight coming through, a little bit of warmth from the practicals coming from all other directions like it. Funny scene where she rips her dress. We see the bounced kind of recessed lighting from the top here, which we're kind of motivating. This light is probably from a practical. The practicals are all in the background, more bounce lighting. Makes sense to me. I buy it. This lighting from the side, we have this practical. It's probably supposed to feel like a practical, and then the soft white lighting from the top. We see that on the top of this wood here. We see practicals reflected in the marble. Pretty cool look overall. Here is another beauty shot. They kind of joke about how they're trying to make her look less distracting, and They say that just by putting glasses on her, like she's not the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. I think that's the line, something like that. Lots of magical bokeh in the background. So they managed to put the chandelier that was from this scene in the reflection in the background to make bokeh. That's clever and worth the money because chandeliers are not cheap to rent. So it showed up twice in that scene. Here is, I think the last time in the movie we're going to see this orange and green color correct. And it seems like it's more set design in this case. This is the bar where they go to meet the kind of like mercenaries and they get in a fight. It seems more like perhaps the walls are actually green, but this is again that orange and green look that we saw momentarily in one of the other scenes. I like this look. It's pretty cool. Definitely feels like these are all being lit by these warm practicals here. Kind of a low angle light, with a little bit of top light happening there as well. Nice warm color correction. And it does seem like a lot of the color palette that I was picking up on is actually the walls are green and then a little bit of brown wood as well here. Pretty badass lighting here. I like this. It's pretty cool from the side where she grabs the gun and then throws him against the wall. Green and orange color correct going on here. And I'll wrap this scene up by saying once again that practicals are everything in movies. Practical, 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 practical window. With a white reference, which makes everything else feel even warmer. Lovely. Moving on to the trenches part, we are seeing her in the trenches where she decides to actually stop and fight. And at this point, we start to really see the Wonder Woman superhero color correct really start to happen. So everything else, very cyan in the background, and her skin tone and lips preserved as pretty much skin tone colored, kind of warm as well. Though we don't see the real warmth until a little bit later on. I do believe from what I read that they did shoot this practically, quite a bit of this, though we're going to be playing a game for the rest of the movie called Real Wonder Woman, CG Wonder Woman. I'm going to call out when I think it's CG and when it's real and that sort of thing, just for fun. Being backlight by daylight here, definitely some sort of blue ambient happening in her nose. So this probably is practical. I did read that they shot a lot of this in England in the winter, so she was really cold when they were filming this, and that the war scenes were really difficult to light with a short amount of daylight, and just in general the conditions are hard. It's messy, and I do kind of believe that is a actual horizon in the background lighting her. I can't say that for sure. It does seem like the ambient is this way, so this would be a normal HMI key, but in general, when you light people with the horizon, like if you went out at sunset at the beach and you frontlit someone with it, you do see these very, very long eye lights in their eyes. And I'm very familiar with them. We use them a lot for commercials. And this does semi-remind me of it, though it could be diffusion as well. Anyway, go check it out if you can. Go light someone with a horizon and watch the eye lights. It's always kind of an interesting look. So here we are. CG Wonder Woman. That looks CG. This whole scene looks completely CG to me. But it's where she jumps out of the trenches and starts running at them. This is obviously real. Very nice side lighting here. Nice, good amount of contrast here, like a 3:1 or 4:1 ratio. Definitely shot on a green screen. Definitely shot on a green screen. But this is the cover photo. I think this is the cover photo with the quintessential full Wonder Woman color correct now. We have some whites going on back here. Skin tone's pretty neutral actual, but then the full cyan everywhere else. Cyan. Here we are again. Real Wonder Woman as she's running forward here. This also feels really real. This feels like the most real shot in the whole thing. Oh, I think it was like handheld. They're chasing her. There's bullets flying. The haze feels real. This feels very real. Like the scene. This feels like a composite. I feel like this was real Wonder Woman, but probably on a green screen. This feels really real as well. They did an amazing job. I don't know how they did this with the bullets, because presumably they're adding all the bullet hits in post, but they had a good amount of interactive lighting. And we see that our white in the background is tinted down, very cyan in the background with a little bit of warm light on her arm here, and very, very warm light from the bullet ricochets. I wonder how they actually added the light to that. Not sure. Maybe it was like a flickering LED. Some warm sunlight coming here. This looks pretty real to me. Maybe green screen. This I feel like was a real plate from overhead. The tracer bullets and stuff all added in CG. Very cyan with a very, very orange hit here. So now the fire from the guns and certain things here are the warmth that they play against this. Very cool scene. Again, this shot, I wanted one of these to be the cover photos, is amazing. Now that I look at this, I feel like this is probably composited here. This doesn't feel uber real, really what's going on, but they did an incredible job with the lighting. It seems like there's definitely a blue ambient coming from straight down, a white light coming from the side, and these bullet ricochets look so good. I don't have any stills, but there's certain stills where the ricochets would actually light her face. I don't know if that was done with CG lighting or they actually had a practical, but it looked really nice. And this whole sequence is pretty phenomenal. And this is definitely just green screen. Definitely jumping around into green screen stage. But when you watch the whole sequence, it definitely cuts together pretty well. This is, I think I took this from like, not the trailer. They actually had the full scene somewhere. Oh, no, I take it back. This is just from the trailer. It's just combined through all the trailers. They basically showed the entire fight, which is fine. So here we have a kind of Ghost in the Shell moment where, just like Scarlett Johansson is jumping through nothing. She's probably not actually jumping through a window. Behind her is green screen. She's just jumping through into the room, and everything else is added in CG. And they use this shot quite a bit in the trailer because it's badass, and it was probably also pretty expensive to do as well. And I will say about this scene, to get like super picky about the lighting, unless there's a window above this, where is that backlight coming from, and what is this backlight coming from? There must be a window above this window. That's the only way that this would kind of make sense. And maybe that's what it is. I don't know. I'm just being picky. This is hilarious. If you go watch the trailer or the movie and you play it back, she jumps through the window and she hits someone with the shield and they go flying like a rag doll. It's pretty hilarious. And we are in full Wonder Woman hero color correct mode here. It's not so much on the warmth yet. The warmth really comes later. We keep talking about that. We have a key light coming from this side, 3/4 backlight, cross key, far key, and very much cyan everywhere else. This is the window light here. Pretty funny wide shot going on as she surveys the room and everyone's like, what just happened? We get this very heroic close-up here, and I believe they shot these with phantoms. There's quite a bit of these slow-mo reaction shots, and I think the director spent a lot of time really getting the performance of these kind of badass moments here, and I'll show you why. I think in the next segment where I think it's Phantom. I could be completely wrong. I've only played with the Phantom like really a couple times. I just thought this was a really awesome badass shot, and again they went really in on trying to make these portraits here of where she's fighting to show her character, and I think they did a great job. CG Wonder Woman. I think this thing where she's sliding on the floor and flipping around, there's a couple fight scenes with this. I don't believe this is a real person. Could be wrong, but this looks like CG to me. But it's a pretty badass sequence, and I thought it was kind of fun to try to figure out what was green screen, what was more practical, what was a CG Wonder Woman. It all flows together really nicely, but now once you slow it down like this, you can kind of tell, I think. This is where she breaks the gun on her back here. And this is where she kicks him through the wall. Now, we can take a vote. This was in the trailer. It looks really badass, and I would believe that you could do this like through a green screen. But I'm guessing this shot is almost entirely CG. You guys let me know in the comments if you think this is real or not, or you were on set or something like that. If you were on set, don't spoil it. We're just kind of playing here. That seems like CG to me. So this part is the town fight after she takes out that entire room of soldiers. So she's definitely getting some sort of superpowers here. I guess this is all CG. They did a great job with these. She's running through the battlefield here, the town, and this is a shot from that scene. And we see here, is this? I think this is an Arri 435, and I was recently holding one because my friend Harvey from Windy Films just bought one. This looks like an Arri 435 with a little 200 mag. So they're doing some handheld work here. And I'm assuming that the reason we have these is because they're high speed. So the Arri 435 and 235 are MOS cameras. And they can shoot very high speed, but they're a little bit loud. You see that they're wearing hearing protection and hats. So it's probably very cold and very loud because there's explosion, big green screen set extension for the background, and some handheld high-speed film cameras that you don't see every day. Here's her picking up a tank and throwing it. This was also almost the thumbnail. Pretty bad ass shot of her and full cyan color correct mode going on. That's her throwing the tank, the aftermath of it. And then this is the shot that made me think that this is Phantom. And I don't know that much about Phantoms, but this doesn't seem like a film tap. It seems much nicer. This is Q-Take. This says mag ready, and mag ready makes me feel like Phantom, and it says 500 F per S and 173 degrees. Who knows why that is? But I think they're shooting a lot of these close-ups with Phantoms to really get that slow motion of her, like, you know, doing that and shooting it in 4K. I could be wrong, but I feel like I caught them shooting Phantom, and I'm assuming that all those really cool, awesome close-ups of her were Phantom. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that doesn't mean Phantom. I'm not sure. Moving on here, not much to call out. Using mostly natural daylight. Seems like the sun coming through here. A little bit of set extension green for if there's any up angles. But what I wanted to call out here was this very interesting Chapman dolly, which I was just spent a lot of time with Chapman, and I've never seen this before. Has a blue offset here. I thought that that was kind of cool. Kind of a cool looking Hustler here. It's a Hustler 4, just like the one we did a video about. But it has all these custom blue parts on it. So blue handles, blue head, and then it has a red chassis. Is this the Wonder Woman Hustler 4 dolly? Did they customize this to make it like red and blue for Wonder Woman? That's really cool. And if I go to Chapman UK, I would like to take a selfie on this dolly. Here is the ending of this sequence here. And we are kind of coming to the end of the movie. We have the full cyan color correct going on. And now, just like we had in the war sequences before with the bullets being the orange, they used the lasso as the color contrast, and this looks amazing in the trailer and in the film. It's a blue color correct. There's all this really cool fighting happening, and on top of it, there's this kind of like lightsaber effect that's happening with this magical lasso. It's pretty awesome looking overall. I think that must have been a fun thing to put together. In compositing, this is clearly all green screen, but still a pretty badass shot, and it's so slow. I think I think a lot of these type of shots where she's like, you know, doing that and reacting, I'm guessing a lot of that was Phantom, even though the primary narrative part of the film was 35. So here's what I'm calling the after party, after they save the town and whatnot, even though this town kind of gets all killed later, sadly. I wanted to just kind of look at the lighting in this wide shot. So we see this awning, right? Okay. So we see this awning, and it has a bunch of practicals in it. So it's kind of like this little French bistro look, right? Lots of orange practicals, little street light and whatnot. A little bit of blue in there, which at night there wouldn't be very much blue. And we see this big shadow here, right? So this is presumably the shadow from these awnings, right? So that means that there's a big light source from up here that's like kind of like this and this as well. And I don't know what that would be, but it's there and it's backlighting this whole scene. Maybe it could just be like a bigger street light or a clock or something like that. But looking at the approach to lighting the scene, these windows are lit up a little bit here as practicals, all practicals, and then just one big backlight that isn't warm. I mean, that isn't cold, it's actually warm, and we'll see that a little bit as we move through the scene. So here's that big backlight basically hitting him, and she's actually shadowing him in this scene, which isn't the best looking in the world. I wonder if they're just doing like Steadicam coverage and they just let this fly that he's this dark, or maybe it's kind of romantic. I don't really know, but we have the practical in the background, slight tiny bit of blue edge light here, very soft, and then whatever this is, this big backlight is basically hitting him there. That's the motivation. Now she is getting the beauty sidelight. This is how we beauty sidelight. And the way that she's oriented, we don't have that big edge light anymore from above that we're looking at. She's being essentially soft lit by this, right? So we consider that this would be like one big light source. That is kind of the motivation here, and we can see the gigantic eye light here, which looks, you know, obviously looks lovely. This is where they go back into the actual apartment or whatnot, and we see a similar style of lighting, though the source seems a little bit skinnier in her eye as well, and they just let the whole thing go to darkness there with an orange, definitely an orange key for him as well, or side key. And here he gets the proper edge light as well. So they're both being far backlit. And this is a very romantic look. So there's a very large light source very close to his face in this scene or this angle. And same thing for her. Moving on to the end of the film here. This is the end finale. We have our very cool practical in the background that is, I'm going to go ahead and say, tinted a little bit blue. And for this scene, we are back in the full blue, like we are in London and like we were in the cave. So this is the full blue color correct happening here. And this is what we think is our main bad guy, but we find out of course, is not. He's looking through the windows. Pretty cool here. This is kind of like a searchlight from below, so they're able to key him like this with a blue light. Seems like there's kind of like a warm tungsten light overhead, which makes sense. That's like kind of one of these guys lighting him from above. But essentially this whole scene is being lit by the practicals and then lights from below looking up. So there's a lot of cool opportunities that happen by lighting like that. So she's being lit from a source that's up here for that. I guess that's the sun, or maybe not the sun, not the moon, or maybe one of the work lights. Pretty cool. Side light from here, and pretty much the full blue color correct going on again. It's a pretty badass shot here. Hero shot for her. This is from the trailer. He's being uplit villain style. He's like, "What are you?" That whole situation. And what I'm guessing, based on this BTS, is the whole thing is basically shot against this green screen. So, in the movie, this whole thing takes place like 20 feet in the air, but likely they just shot at floor level here. And we see some sort of remote head with the film camera there. The practicals are warm out there. And we're seeing a lot of warmth in the keying here. So I'm interested in how the blue light came in, but I thought it was just cool to see the set. The glass looks like it's practical. The inside of the set is being lit as well, and everything in the background. So like all this stuff, I guess it's just darkness anyway. Those practicals were added in post, and I guess it's just blue anyway. But all that stuff was added in post, and I think some of the smudges and stuff on the windows as well. So it's always cool to see the BTS, or at least I enjoy that as well. This looks like it could possibly be all CG, but that's cool. The all blue color correct being offset by the warm practicals there, and the glowing rope is just one of the coolest looks I think there's been in a while. Just full blue, and then a lasso that's glowing gold. Pretty awesome. And for this exact reason, I mean, this just looks so badass. She's against this blue sky background. I feel like she should be warmer if she's being lit by this, but maybe she's being lit by something else. I don't know. But anyway, full blue with the lasso. I like it. I almost like it as much as Star Wars with red and blue lightsabers, but it's hard to like something more than liking Star Wars lightsabers. And here we are at the ending of the movie. So definitely spoiler alert here. Actually, I didn't really see who the villain was, and you don't really see it too much in what's left anyway, but this is the end of the movie. So if you haven't seen it, go see it. Or if you don't care about spoilers, then come along. We're going to spoil it up. The real bad guy blows up the tower with her in it, and that's what this explosion is. And we're still in full blue color correct mode going on here with a little bit of the warm practicals or white practicals in the background. And this is where she starts to really, and the DP talked about this in one of the interviews I read. This is the scene, the finale of the movie, where we have the full hero genesis, where kind of like her full powers come to life. And we have a kind of shift in the color correct and the lighting and the whole theme of it, which we'll see in a second. But as of now, it's set up as a full blue color correct, like we've seen before, some hard backlight, a lot of practicals and reflections, all good cinematic lighting tricks and whatnot. Moving on to this part, we see the fire. And this is what we start to show as kind of the birth of her powers here. So motivated, a lot of this cool light is actually motivated in this case by these what would be metal halide HMI blue, basically searchlights and practicals going on. So that's what's motivating a lot of the blue. I don't think it's I don't believe this is a moonlight look. This is more of a industrial metal halide versus fire look. And as the scene progresses, she gets kind of angry. I think Steve dies, and I think that sets her off. Is that what's going on here? I think that's what's happening. She kills a lot of people, so there's this fire look. So she's very rageful, and this is basically her now having her powers born out of this fire, which I think is almost like kind of like a biblical reference there. And I forget when this sequence is, but she's still super angry, and going around killing everybody, and there's fire everywhere. And this is the first time in the film we've ever just seen like full fire. And I think it should be a big visual contrast for when you're watching the film, is because you've been watching all these very blue color corrects happening the whole time. We see these little hints of the gold saturated, the whip, the lasso, and that sort of thing, and everything else has been kind of muted. And this is the first time we see this full-on super orange color happening here. So it should stick out for multiple reasons as the climax of the film. And I have to imagine that's what the DP was talking about when he was talking about the evolution of the look regarding this scene. This is where she's about to kill the the lady that makes the poison. Just got an email now, even though it's really late. We have the fire in the background looking very Hades, very hellish looking, you know, like you'd imagine. And she actually decides not to kill her. So that's nice. But very saturated orange. It's one of the first times we see this. So I actually kind of take it back from the beginning of this when I was talking about this being kind of similar to Transformers or Pirates, where it's very orange and very blue. Actually, I think in general, this movie is very blue and desaturated until the end where we have this very orange look. So I take it back. I take it back after like an hour into this breakdown. We see the main bad guy, which I guess we don't really see in this breakdown. So that's cool. So that's a full spoiler, but we see the main bad guy channeling all his like ancient Greek mythology lightning into her. And we have the blue against orange happening here. And instead of it killing her, like you would think it would, she kind of absorbs it. And then she becomes this kind of like fire phoenix thing. Like we saw in the beginning of the movie when she was fighting her teacher. She flies up in the air and spoiler alert, something happens. And we end with her being able to fly now. So she's fully awoken her Wonder Woman powers. That's pretty cool. I don't know that much about Wonder Woman, so I'm kind of interested to see what her powers are. Does she fly an invisible plane or something like that? Is that a joke? I forget what that is. But I'm actually excited to go see Justice League just to kind of see what it is that Wonder Woman does. I don't know much about it. But we do end the film on a happy sunset scene just like this, where literally the sun is coming up with a lens flare. Cool reflection. That reflection should be warmer, I think. So another B plus composite here. Maybe the reflection's there. Maybe it does make sense. It's reflecting this part of the sky. I mean, it's all CG, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, this is all blue screen. But pretty cool ending to the film. And again, I'm excited to see Justice League because I don't know anything about Wonder Woman. Boom. So that wraps it up for our look at Wonder Woman. I did enjoy this film. It was kind of long, but not that I really thought that, but it was a long movie when I was trying to schedule out my day. I liked it overall. There's been a lot of drama, and I try not to get into it. Definitely not in these breakdowns, but just because I was like trying to research the movie, I ended up digging into it a little bit too much. Overall, I liked how the movie came out. I like the look. I like her character. I definitely understand a lot more where she came from. It's kind of like in the X-Men movies when you find out, or for me, this gets maybe a little political, but when you find out that Magneto is like a Holocaust survivor, it just gives like his character and his hatred just another dimension. And I think that this gives a similar background to Wonder Woman. And, you know, these movies are targeting me as a millennial. I grew up reading comic books, not this one, watching the cartoons, and it's targeting me, and it worked. And I'll probably see a lot of these Marvel movies because they're fun to break down. There's BTS. And in general, I guiltily just kind of enjoy them as far as just like pure entertainment. So I don't know why I'm getting into all this. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown, learned something new and whatnot. If you are interested in learning more about the commercial cinematography course on white cycle lighting I'm putting together, the link will be down below and you can sign up to learn more about that as it develops. Until next time, I will see you guys on the next one. You get out there and plan better, shoot better.